debugging walkthrough for the exercise Debugging Square. So at the top here we have our starter code, and then here we have some debugging tips which are really useful to read, and also a hyperlink to the Comp 1511 debugging guide, which is very helpful. Then we have the task. So this exercise takes in a positive integer n as input and prints out the outline of a square of size n by n in asterisks. Currently it has some issues. Your job is to figure them out and fix the code. So here we have some examples of what the expected program is meant to do, and then we have our style and auto testing at the bottom. So let's grab the starter code and let's open it up. Okay, so this is what we start with. The first thing to do when debugging is to compile the program and see anything that it complains about. So here we get a warning on our scanf, and the DCC explanation says, perhaps you've forgotten the ampersand before size, which we have, so let's add that in. Okay, and now let's recompile. And it says we're missing a semicolon here on line 22, so let's add that in. Okay, and recompile. Okay, so warning, variable rows is uninitialized when it's used here, so it wants us to just set them to a value, because here it's used but it has never been set a value. So let's set this to 0, and while I'm there I might do the same for column. Okay, it compiled, so let's see. So let's do one of the samples. So let's do 2 because it's the smallest one. So our code just prints 2 asterisks, no new line, and it doesn't really make the square pattern that we're looking for. So let's have a think about what could be happening, and let's run through these double while loop structure and see what could be the issue. So while rows is less than size, in this case size is 2 and rows is 0, it goes into this loop. While column is less than size, it prints a colon, adds 1 to the column, print the column, which is what ours would do, add 1, and then at this point column would be 3, which is not less than 2, so it would jump here, add 1 to rows, and go straight back to this while loop where 1 is less than 2, so it'd go here, but column is still 3 from the previous iteration, so I think we're missing the resetting of our column. So let's add that in, and let's recompile our program. Okay, cool. So now we can see it prints the 4 asterisks, but it's kind of there, but it's not printing a square. So we got to think about where we might need to print a new line character to make this work. So we have like multiple rows, so I would think that this is 1 row and this is 2 row. So after each row, we need to print a new line character. So let's do it just here. Let's add a new line character, and let's see if that fixes anything. Cool, that's exactly what we want. So now let's see if it works for a large pattern like 5. Okay, so it is printing the 5 by 5 square that we want. However, we only want the outline of the square. So we're going to have to consider where we are in position to the row and column at different points to be able to make it the outline. So before we print this, we're going to need to consider where we are, and when we need to consider things, we usually use an if statement. So let's have a think about what we need to check here. So we know asterisks are only printed on the top and bottom, and the far left and far right. So how do we know that we're in that? We're going to need to check the column and row value. So we know that if column is 0, we're at the top, or if column equals to size -1, we're at the top. And now how do we know for rows? We know if we're at the first row or if we're at the last one. And I've just realized that when we're checking equivalence, we need to use double equals everywhere. So let's fix that up. Okay, so if we're at the top, if we're at column 0, which is this one here, or we're at the last column, or we're at the top row or the bottom row, we want to be printing a asterisk. Whereas if we're not there and we're in the middle, we just want to print a space, right? We don't want to print an asterisk or anything. So let's see if this fixes what's going on. Okay, that looks pretty good. And now let's check the other one here, which is 1. Perfect, that looks good. So now let's run auto test. Okay, this is looking good. Nice. And finally, let's have a look at our style and make sure we're passing 1511 style. Okay, so it looks like we have a little bit. So no ZID in the header. So let's fix up the header comment. So we add my name, my ZID, and the date. I'm just going to say in June of 2023. And it says overly long if statements. So it wants us to break it up, or even better, move it into a function. Well, we haven't quite learnt functions yet. So let's see. The first thing we're doing is breaking the 80 character line limit. So let's do this, see if it fixes 1511 style or if it still wants us to do anything. Nope, that looks good. It's just because it was really long and extending far out here, it didn't like it. So this is a working solution for the exercise debugging square.